Bet99 Sportsbook, the official betting partner of NTC. They have some great content over on their site, and you can also see our podcast episodes over on their website. So if you guys wanted to get involved with betting, whether you're a veteran, you're a newcomer, if you have any interest at all, check out Bet99. They have some great content ready for you to go. They're based in Canada, so all my Canada people especially, you're going to love that. They're a great resource, so definitely want to push you guys to check them out if you have the time and you want to get into some betting. I mean, the NBA season is just around the corner. You want to put down some bets. Welcome back, ladies and gents. You're listening to the NTC podcast. This is our 43rd installment, and we're in the lead up heading into training camp. Media days are underway, so we're super excited to be back for another installment of the pod. This evening, I'm really excited to welcome in Shane Young. He is a credentialed member of the media. He does some great work for Forbes Sports. He's a columnist / analyst for them. Me and Shane go way back. I've known this dude for quite a while. Does some quality work, and still trying to figure out why an NBA team hasn't rolled the dice on him and taken him in. But that's a discussion for another day. We'll leave that rant for another time. But Shane, thanks so much for joining us. Excited to have you back, man. And how in the world have you been, man? How was your layoff from the NBA? And I'm sure you're excited to get back into the action here as we lead up to the start of the season.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you, Aaron, as always. I feel like every time I come on, there's something big happening. And what's bigger than the start of the season? Like, I think this might have been our first preview. Like, usually you and I connect during the middle of the season or something. But,
Right.
Man, it's been great. I think the past calendar year has been wild for me. I obviously had my best experience ever covering the finals. It just feels like things are back to normal when it comes to our type of stuff with media, to where COVID restrictions are kind of getting lifted
Yes.
slowly but surely. So hopefully it'll feel like 2019 again. So for me, I'm doing great. Just can't wait for this particular season, because I really do feel like a third of the NBA is contenders for the title.
And that's what we're going to get into, man, for our first topic of the day. I mean, you look around the NBA, you look at all the teams,
Yeah.
you look at the teams that made the playoffs last season, most of them look like they're going to be in position to replicate their success in at least some type of way. And then there's several other teams that didn't make the playoffs last season, but they have made some improvements that put them in the hunt to be a contender, or at least a very solid team heading into next season. So without further ado, Shane, let's go ahead and dive into the Eastern Conference as a whole. We can, I'm sure, spend the entire podcast talking about this conference. This isn't your Eastern Conference from whatever. As far back
2014,
as you go,
2014,
15, whatever you want to, however you want to frame it. I mean, the Eastern Conference is transformed for the better in terms of competitive level. You look across the landscape, 1 through 8, even 10, 12, these teams are looking great going into training camp. There are several impact players. I mean, there is an all-star that literally transitioned from the West to the East just a couple of weeks ago, further bolstering the power level of the Eastern Conference altogether. So, I mean, super excited to see how this goes. But, Shane, the way I was thinking about doing this is saving those contenders for last. So we already know about Boston. We already know about Brooklyn and Miami and Philly and those teams. But what about some of those teams from last season that, maybe we're not talking quite a bit about, maybe not quite enough about for one reason or another? I'll go ahead and put one team out there that I think, maybe we can get a little bit more.
It's going to be the same one. I think it's probably going to be the same one. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see, man. But I mean, today is, how the NBA does their 30 teams in 30 days. They do that every year, starting September 1st, going into the end of the month, September 30th. They'll talk about a different team every day, and then they'll have highlight games on TV, which is always fun to watch, past and present. But today's team was the Chicago Bulls. That was the team that they highlighted. And we saw DeMar DeRozan's game from earlier in the season. I think it was February, went against the Spurs and had one of his incredible fourth quarters, had 40 points, one of several performances. But in all the talk of the East, we talk about all these other teams. Milwaukee is another one. But I feel like the Bulls are getting a little bit kind of brushed under the rug. Lonzo Ball's injury, just for whatever reason, they're not getting quite the amount of coverage as they were heading into last season. DeRozan's back. Caruso should be healthy. Patrick Williams is a big name that should be healthy heading into the first week of the season here. Vucevic is still a quality player. So, I mean, they may not be the top of the class of the East, but they're still a very formidable team. I mean, how are you feeling about them heading into the season? And do you see anything different from them compared to last season? I mean, how are they shaping up in your opinion?
I think with Chicago, the thing to keep in mind is that I I think a lot of the viewers look at the Bulls season last year as, I wouldn't say fluke, because DeRozan is amazing at what he does, but I feel like a lot of their success, a lot of their wins came off of like his heroics, like just absolutely ridiculous games. I know he had a couple of game winners back to back, and it
Back to
felt like
back,
that's
yeah.
how they were able to compile wins. But I know that their record against the top level teams in the Eastern Conference, or the Western Conference, any top level team, was very poor. So they were beating up on a lot of the other Central Division opponents, or Southeast Division opponents. So it it was like they were doing what the Spurs did for years and years. It was like, win the games you're supposed to, so you can afford to lose the other games. I remember they got smashed by Brooklyn by 30 or 40 points against Chicago. That was a national television game. That's kind of when everyone stopped the entire discussion of, can Chicago contend or make the East Finals. Everyone just said no immediately after that, and
Yep.
it was never a question. I'm looking forward to Patrick Williams. Obviously, I think this team is going to be better defensively than they were last year, just because you know as well as I do. You bring in the Alex Caruso and Patrick Williams and Lonzo Ball as they did last year. Now Lonzo's obviously hurt. Hopefully he gets that figured out and he's back for majority of the season. We'll see. But it's never about the first year. Never. It's always about building that chemistry on the defensive side, and bringing those guys back and having that camaraderie and being a cohesive unit for the following years. You're never going to be, rarely going to be a really good defensive team just because you brought in defensive minded pieces the first year. It takes time. And DeRozan, that's not his strength. Zach LaVine, definitely not his strength at all. And Vucevic, obviously, he was a tire fire for most of the part of the season, defensively at least.
Yep.
I feel like they're going to be better just off of having those guys back for a full season. Hopefully in Lonzo's case. But for me, Aaron, I'm a little bit lower on the consensus, or lower than the consensus when it comes to Chicago. That's not because of anything they did. I think Zach LaVine's going to have an awesome year, probably better year than he did last year.
Mm-hmm.
The issue is everything around them got better. I even look at Brooklyn. Brooklyn's the biggest wild card in the entire league. I said on Locked On Pacers podcast the other day, they could win 60 games and I would not bat an eye. They could win 40 games and I wouldn't be surprised. They have the highest range in the league.
Yep.
Well, what do you do
100%.
with if you're Chicago or something like that? Like, I feel like they're going to be right there in the same ballpark they were last year, 44 to 45 wins. I don't really see a higher ceiling than that than Chicago. I'm curious if you agree with that. Like, I feel like that right there would be their ceiling.
I would agree with that. You look at the roster. I mean, they didn't make any significant changes from last year. I mean,
Yeah,
what was
continuity
their
is
biggest
what it's
acquisition?
about for them. It's about continuity.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the only signing I could think of, the change they made, was bringing in Andre Drummond off the bench at the center position. But I mean, what's he going to do? He was always more about numbers and actual impact. So I mean, he's not really going to move the needle for them, unfortunately. I'm just super bummed that Lonzo Ball has had another injury. I just wanted him healthy for, at least 65, 70 games. I mean, that would be a good benchmark for him to hit. But I mean, he's already going to be behind the 8 ball if these reports are accurate. So that's going to hurt them defensively, especially at the point of attack again. But Patrick Williams is an eye to keep is a guy to keep an eye on, because, like you said, he brings in that versatility from the forward spot in terms of being a defensive guy for him. And I think his offense still has a couple of steps to take forward. Still a very young player. I mean, he hasn't even reached the end of his rookie contract yet. So you look at what he can possibly do for the team. It's very impressive. But
you would hope that he follows like the Lou Dort type of guy that is so impactful defensively that anything you get offensively is gravy. Anything you get offensively is extra. So
yeah, that's a good way to look at it. So, I mean, I think the bottom line with the Bulls is they're going to have a good season. I mean, they're a solid team. They have 2 all-star type players. I mean, that's nothing to overlook. No one's going to say they're going to be a bad team, but in the grand scheme of the East, yeah, they just didn't make enough steps forward as many of the other teams did. So that puts them behind the ball.
And I would actually, if I obviously we don't know, this is all guesswork, but I would bet on DeRozan having a worse year. Now, worse year doesn't mean bad year.
True.
He had a really great year. So I would just bank on him having a worse year than last year. And that's really the number one reason why I don't think they'll be as good.
That's fair. I mean, he's not 25. It's not like he's ascending. He's on the decline. So, I mean, that's reasonable to assume he's not going to be as good from last season. So that's definitely something that's going to be worth keeping an eye on. But as we roll through the East, Shane, I mean, other than the clear-cut contenders, I mean, you mentioned Brooklyn, these teams that we know are going to be at least 45, 50 wins. Who else do you see in this conference that can make some noise? Maybe not necessarily championship noise, but,
and it's not just because it's your market, but man, I've been all over the Atlanta Hawks this year or this offseason ever since the DeJounte Murray trade, which a lot of people didn't like. A lot of people thought it was too much. I guess if you look at it through a certain lens, it is kind of risky. But my take is that he's so good. I don't think the Spurs had enough national televised games when he was that good for people to know his impact.
Yeah.
So I just want to see how it works. And I think I picked Bogdan Bogdanovic for second and sixth man of the year the other day or last week. So I assuming he doesn't start, because assuming they go with Trey, DeJounte, DeAndre Hunter, and then the two bigs, Collins if he's still there, and then Capella. I think Bogdanovic is set to have an awesome year. And trading Kevin Huerter to Sacramento, you lose some spacing, especially when you're going to replace him with DeJounte, who's not really a threat. That's the number one question for Atlanta, is if Trey has the ball, which he's going to have the ball, because
obviously,
you can't bring in DeJounte Murray and just say, Trey, you're specifically off ball now. That would be taking the ball out of the hands of one of the 4 or 5 best offensive players in the world. Like that would just be ludicrous to do. I think we've seen with Steph Curry, not to draw that parallel, but I think we've seen with Steph, like you have to have the ball in his hands at a certain point in clutch time. But when that's happening, what does DeJounte do? Is he going to be what I hope he is going to be one of the best, if not the best, guard screeners in the league? Imagine a small pick and roll. Not even a pick and roll, just small screen action to kind of confuse the defense there, with DeJounte Murray setting screens for Trey, and vice versa. Because I mean, Aaron, like the best shooter or the best screeners are often the best shooters, because they just confuse the defense and
like Steph
really create havoc out there.
A great example of that.
Exactly. So I think Trey could even do more of that now when DeJounte has the ball. So I'm fascinated. I want to see how they figure this out. I think they have the coaching staff to figure it out, but I would not be shocked if they start off maybe like, I'm just going to say like 13-10, something like that. And then they start getting things going and then obviously grease the wheels and they start winning a lot of games. But as long as they have Collins there and Capella, I'm not that worried about them defensively. I don't think they're going to be towards the bottom of the league. Like, it's weird with Atlanta. Sometimes they hover around like average, but then sometimes they're god awful. I think this is the year with DeJounte Murray's leadership. Even though he's only like 25, I think he has a good voice to where he can kind of get into guys if they're not getting stops on the defensive end. I think they're going to be back to league average defensively, somewhere around there. And then I would not be shocked. It's a hot take, but best offensive team in the NBA. Come down between Denver and Atlanta. Denver and Atlanta would be my 2 best offenses. I'm curious what you think about that.
Yeah, that's definitely. I would say that's a hot take compared to maybe what the consensus would say about them from an offensive perspective. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. I mean, you look at Trae Young; he's like you said, he's one of the premier offensive players in our league with his combination of passing, spacing, being able to get into the paint and just wreak havoc. John Collins is a very good offensive player. And then you can't forget about DeAndre Hunter. He was hurt. But if he is anywhere as solid as he was about a year and a half ago when he went on that little stretch before he got hurt, man, he can really raise their ceiling as well. So I think if he is right, that's definitely a possibility because he's a guy you can count on to stretch the floor. He's got a big enough body that he can, make some things happen in the paint. So yeah, I mean, I think it's reasonable to assume that. What I say, what I bet on it, maybe not, but
no,
it was. I'd put it out there as a possibility for sure. So
yeah. With Atlanta, I don't, contrary to what I said about Brooklyn, I said has the highest range in the NBA. Not even just the East, in the NBA. They could be 40, they could be a 60-win team if everything goes right. I think Atlanta might have the smallest range. What do you think about that? Because I think this team is too good and too deep. Like, they're one of the deepest teams in the league. You don't think of that. Like, you don't think of depth when it comes to the Hawks, but they are deeper than the Cavaliers.
Yeah.
Cavaliers have probably I don't even think they have a better starting lineup in my opinion, but you could argue the Cavs have a better starting lineup, but I just think the Hawks' depth is going to lift them over Cleveland. But I think Atlanta's floor might be the 8 or 7, and their ceiling might be, the 4. So
yeah,
I mean,
that's
I don't think it's that. They can't get to 1. They can't, and they're not going to follow the playoffs as long as Trae Young is on that floor.
Yep, for sure. No, that I would agree with that as well. They're not the absolute elite. I think maybe they're another piece away from being in the top 3. But like you said, I mean, they're good at every position. I mean, Okongwu quietly, I think, is one of the better backup options at center. So, I mean, if Capella misses time, Okongwu swings in there. He takes the minutes away at the center position, and they don't miss a beat. So Justin Holiday is a great pickup for depth. He's one of the,
Don't they have both Holidays?
I think so. They have Aaron and Justin. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Aaron at the
I said both, like Drew doesn't exist.
Right. Drew, never heard of that guy. I don't know. But but yeah, I would agree with that for sure. And then going back to your points about DeJounte, I mean, I think last season's experience with the Spurs being the offensive hub was a great learning experience for him.
Yeah.
He was, again, a great defender on the perimeter, but also, I mean, people sleep on his impact. I mean, prime example, I was talking to my friend who's a Warriors fan the other day, and I was like, yeah, don't forget the Hawks brought in DeJounte Murray. And he's like, oh, that's right. Yeah. So, but I mean, he's not that good. He's not anything special. And I was like, well, he was an all-star last season. Really? Like, is he that good? I'm like, go look at his numbers. 21. Yeah. I think it was like 21, 9 and 8. I mean,
I don't know if you've ever brought up this stat on the pod. It's a good thing you just threw that out there about the impact, because I don't know specifically, but I think it's like one of only 3 guards to have 19, 9 and 9 or 19, 9 and 8 for a season. DeJounte Murray, Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson. Pretty
I
elite.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, that's pretty elite. Yeah.
I figured he had put up some kind of, he was in some historic company, because those numbers.
You gotta throw steals in there too. It's like 2 steals or something.
Okay, I got you. Yeah. But I mean, it makes sense because you look at his numbers, box score numbers. I mean, that's Westbrook-esque. Westbrook in his better days, but definitely substantial impact. So I think that's, you can't sleep on his potential impact for this team. But you said they might start off like 13-10, something like that, like around 500. I mean, you got to look at who they're bringing in. It's not a seamless fit. I mean, those 2 guys, they're going to play well off of one another defensively, but offensively, neither of them are used to being off the ball. Trae Young has had one of the highest usage rates in the entire league his entire career. And you look at DeJounte, I mean, he was the guy for San Antonio last season. So he's not used to being off the ball because he made everything happen, as evidenced by his box score numbers last year. So they're both going to have to do a little bit of a adjusting. And I think somebody asked Nate McMillan the other day if he's going to stagger their minutes. And, of course he chuckled because he's not going to like flat out answer that. But I think it's reasonable to assume he's going to try to do that a little bit so that he has some kind of legitimate offensive presence at all times on the floor, because Aaron Holiday is not that guy. So
it's a good point. It's a very, very toned down version of James Harden and Chris Paul, where you have someone that is adept at running an offense for all 48 minutes if they elect to do that. I think Nate McMillan's smart enough to do that. I mean, you can't have minutes where you have no leader out there. You said something about the seamless fit, how it's not a seamless fit. And the funniest part of everything here is that I would argue that Herter and Trae Young was the seamless fit. That was the perfect fit. They advanced to Eastern Conference Finals on the back of Kevin Herter, 27 points in the Game 7.
Cook Seth Curry.
So exactly.
I'll never
So
forget that.
so you're going to have adjustments to be made, and I don't think they'll start well because of that, but I could see this team being in the first round in a game 7 against, I don't know, Milwaukee or something like that. I could see them really forcing the issue against one of these top tier contenders.
That's fair. I think there's a lot to look forward to with this team. I'm going to be super excited to see them in this market here in Atlanta. There's going to be a lot of coverage on this team, a lot of eyes on this team, not just because of Trae Young, but all these pieces, how they fit together. And I think,
do you think Collins stays a Hawk?
I mean, for this season, I would say yes. I haven't heard of anything being on the horizon. Of course, that doesn't mean anything in this league. Things can happen out of the blue. But if I had to make a guess, I would say at least for this season, yes. Maybe if this season doesn't go as planned, if something happens, if him and Trae have another blow up, if they clash again next season, maybe next off season, something can happen. But I'll say for this season, he stays put.
Yeah, I mean, I would too. I would say he's a Hawk until the trade deadline, and that was the only reason he wouldn't be there anymore is if they are like way under 500 or something. So.
Yeah, that's what I think about them.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously they have so much they can do offensively. You start to think about what teams can be at the top 15, top 10 in offensive rating. Obviously, they're going to be one, Brooklyn, Boston, all those teams. But another team that the past couple of seasons have made their name on offense, you look at a team in Charlotte and what they've been able to do with that collection of talent. They've been in the news a little bit for the wrong reasons as well this offseason. So that puts a little bit of a damper on their season. However, LaMelo Ball is still a part of this club. And I mean, they had a great draft. I mean, they did a lot of great things. So, I mean, this team has been a lot of Jekyll and Hyde, and there needs some consistency. I don't know if this is going to be the year that happens, but in any case, they're going to be in the hunt for a play-in spot at the very least. They're going to be a tough team to dispatch because of just how talented they are in the offensive realm. And I'm just really excited to see year 3 LaMelo Ball. I think it was Jackson Frank or somebody on Twitter had just mentioned him. He's like year 3 LaMelo Ball, and he mentioned another third-year player, and I was like, I'm very excited to see those two as well. So thoughts on Charlotte? I mean,
I think he mentioned Halliburton maybe.
That was the other one, yeah. Year 3 Halliburton, which he's going to be a guy to watch as well. He's so talented. But from Charlotte's perspective, I mean, sure, they're probably not going to make a ton of noise as far as the playoffs go. Hopefully they don't get blitzed in the play-in game again. I mean, they just embarrassed themselves 2 years in a row. But when it comes to what they could possibly do on the court, I mean, there's so many possibilities. Rozier has been a great player for them. I think PJ Washington is going to be a steady guy for them once again. So, I mean, they're going to be fun to watch, I think, at the very least. I mean, how do you feel about them heading into the season, what they could possibly do on the court?
I'm obviously really bummed about just not having that max slot there for the Bridges contract. Obviously, he does not deserve to play another game again, so that is what it is. But it just sucks for them that like they don't have that talent, right?
Yeah.
That they're kind of wasting that elsewhere. That's just on the sidelines. I love the LaMelo Ball. I think he is going to be, if not already, a top 20 or so guy. I don't know where he would be, but he's coming quickly. My issue is I just don't like the team around him. I just, me personally, I don't think they have enough talent to survive. Maybe if this was 2015-16, where you could get to 44 wins and be like a 4 seed, it was kind of awful there for a while there. And I think in 2014 it was the all-time worst. I think the Hawks made the playoffs with 38 wins.
Sub 40. Insane.
And they played the Pacers pretty well and went to Game 7.
Yep.
So, but this is not that Eastern Conference. You led the show saying that. I think Charlotte's range is probably in the 33 to 41. I just don't see them being a better than a 500 team. I think that's max for me. And that's on the shoulders of LaMelo if that happens. But they need some of these guys to click quickly. Like, I mean, if James Bouknight turns out to be something awesome for them, great. You found something that, because last year he didn't play a lot, didn't shoot a lot of shots. I mean, and was very inefficient. Obviously, rookies, but they just need some of these young guys to click to be along with LaMelo, considering they just lost Bridges, who was supposed to be that guy. Rozier, he might be the guy that I just don't know what to make of in the entire NBA. It's like the dude puts up awesome numbers every year and like shoots. He's become a way better shooter than I ever imagined he would when he was in Boston. But like I just don't see like I don't know what the future. I don't know if he's going to stay there long term. I don't know if like they're going to look to get rid of him. I know the Clippers were actually looking at him last year, or no, the year before, whenever Kawhi was healthy, to kind of come in and provide some point guard spark. But obviously the money they couldn't make the money work. So I would like to see him on a contender, like somewhere like a Boston again, not Boston specifically, but like a team like Boston where he was a spark plug. I don't know. I don't really don't know what to make of this team. Like you forget that Gordon Hayward exists. Like you just forget he exists sometimes, man.
Yeah,
it's wild. I don't think this team's a playoff team. My buddy Tony East, he was like he picked Charlotte to be the team that could potentially jump in the standings and be the most surprising team in the East. I'm like, man, like I don't think they have that maximum capacity in them. Like at their best, I think LaMelo is an all-star. I think he's pushing all NBA third team at his best, but they're not. That's not going to equate to wins, especially not with the talent around him.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, you look at Rozier, what he can do on a basketball court. I mean, I think he's one of the most fun guys to watch on a basketball court on a night-to-night basis. I mean, he pulls out dribble moves that you would see at Rucker Park, nightly, which is, the entertainment value of this team is sky high. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But I think I described them on one podcast as being a team with so much style but no substance. There's just no like real grit to this team. I don't see any kind of real fight discipline sometimes, as evidenced by 2 straight blowouts in the playing games. I mean, they're so talented, and like some nights they're just so explosive that that's all they need. But when it comes to an entire season, and especially when it comes to playoff time, and I would consider the play-in kind of like a playoff game, because you look at who you're playing in the play-in game. I mean, when the Pelicans made the postseason this spring, I mean, they're playing the Clippers. I mean, these are legitimate games. And when it comes down to those type of environments, they're just not suited to handle that. So I wouldn't peg them as a playoff team either, especially with the way the East has improved. And it doesn't seem like the team has improved. I mean, significantly downgraded because of Bridges, as you mentioned. So that's just a tough thing to see. I think hopefully at some point LaMelo gets the perfect core around him to really take advantage of all his gifts. But as it stands,
it's brutal. It's brutal because Charlotte is one of those teams that kind of like Minnesota, where no free agent is going to Minnesota, so they're going to have to pull off a trade, and that's what Charlotte, that's what Minnesota, that's what the Wolves did.
Yeah,
and then Rudy Gobert is locked up under contract. The Hornets have to do that with someone that's locked up under contract. I mean, was Hayward even? I think he was a sign and trade. Maybe was he a sign and trade with Boston?
I think he was.
Yeah, it's like I'm sure like he obviously had to want to go to Charlotte in the first place, but like that's the only main guy you can think of that has decided to go to Charlotte. It's not going to happen. They have to build through the draft, and again, I hate to keep bringing it up, but like they hit on a draft pick in Bridges, and now that is down the drain. So it's an unlucky situation.
It is, man. It is for sure. There's so many teams here in this conference we can discuss, and hope maybe in another day we can get into the rest of them here. I mean, Cleveland.
We could group them together too. I mean, I feel like they're all pretty even up the top.
For sure. And we didn't even touch on Miami or teams like that. So
let's do Miami let's do Miami for a couple minutes here.
Okay. All right.
I'm lower on the Heat than everyone else. Usually I'm higher.
I am too. Just pretend I'm not wearing the shirt right here. Just I'm going to put a black strip of tape over that because I'm lower on them too. I mean, they just haven't done enough to keep up in the conference compared to the other contenders, and they lost a key starter that covered a lot of their shortcomings. So
I'll say this. I'll say this, man. So even Heat fans are even Heat fans are saying that they're lower on the team. You know what that means? If they get to 53, 54 wins and get a top 3 seed, Spoelstra has I'm not even sure what superlative I'm about to
Goat
say.
tier.
I don't even know what to give him, because he's already a Hall of Fame coach. Like, but
Yeah,
I'm trying to like say something ludicrous, but like he will prove to be one of the 10 best coaches of all time. Like,
100%.
it's stupid what he does, what he gets out of these guys. And if he gets them into a home court, or not even, if he gets them to a top 3 or 2 seed with that, without replacing PJ Tucker, with the injuries that Jimmy's going to have, Bam's probably going to have some too. But pencil in Jimmy for missing 20 games. It's happening. So some way or another, it's happening. In those absences, I don't think they can win games now. If
I
they
agree.
do, if they do, man, either Tyler Hero is all-star level. Kyle Lowry has dropped significant weight and he is back to 32-year-old Kyle Lowry, or Spoelstra is just getting the most out of Vincent, Strus, and Yurtseven, all these other guys.
That's the only way. Bam needs to take a step forward, which I've been campaigning for quite a while, going back to the playoffs. It's just this Jimmy has to do so much that it puts an enormous strain on him, which I think in turn causes some of these injuries. It causes him to overexert himself. It's just there's so much he has to do. And you saw that in the playoffs. I mean, he was a superhero for them. I mean, playoff Jimmy is a top 5 or 10 player in this league. I mean, he's just incredible. But there's not enough around him, I think, in the absence of some of these other guys. But I will say, every season it seems like the Miami just pull a guy from out there in the dirt, and he's magically a rotation player, Gabe Vincent and Max Strus and all these guys. So I would bank on somebody like that showing up for the Heat again. So just keep that in mind.
It might end up being Martin. It might end up being Martin because he was good last year. Like, not to say he's going to come out of nowhere, but he's going to have to be a huge fill-in for PJ Tucker. So
Definitely.
if he excels at that, I mean, I guess for full transparency, I have Miami tied for 4th and 5th with Toronto at 50 wins. I have Miami at 50 wins. I got them at 50 wins, tied for the 4-5 spot. So, I'm just not. I don't think they're going to win the East again.
I'm with you. Which it just kind of brings back that memory of the Game 7 shot that just didn't go quite the right way. The fortunes could have been totally different, but that's the way it goes sometimes. But yeah, that's the landscape. That's pretty much where we're at. And I mean, it's gonna be incredible to watch this Eastern Conference go to work. I'm trying to remember. Didn't the East end up with a winning record against the West last season?
First time in a while.
Yeah. So I mean, that year right there is just crazy.
This year, I think I have it with the East having 15 more. So it's still pretty close. But I think just in a vacuum, you would take. I think the Western Conference teams look more attractive on paper, but the East teams end up winning more games. I don't know. I like the West teams more as championship contenders, but Milwaukee, Boston are just juggernauts.
They're incredible. And I just remember going back to those Eastern conferences that were very subpar. I would look at that, NBA.com does their power rankings every week, and you would see the East versus West record at the bottom. And it would be like the West went 17-2 against the East this week. I'm just like, here we go again. But I guess it's a new chapter in the league, which I'm so excited to see. But in any case, Shane, let's move on to another story that hit the airwaves here this past week. One that we didn't see coming, as is the case by a lot of these extensions. CJ McCollum is re-upped with the Pelicans for 2 years. So according to a report by Woj a few days ago, it's a 2-year, $64 million deal. It will take him through the 25-26 season. So he's now up to 4 years and $133 million, because he was under contract through the 23-24 season before this extension was signed. So going back to last season, this is a guy that was very underrated. I mean, you go back and you want to look at some of his numbers, his impact. I mean, he was an elite spot-up shooter. I'm pulling these numbers from my guy Mavs Draft on Twitter, but because he mentioned him back in August as an underrated guy. And he was 46% spot-up shooter. He was at 24 points per game. I know you don't like field goal percentage, Shane. It's not your cup of
Oh,
tea.
here we go.
But he was near 50% in that regard.
Yeah.
Almost 6 assists. And that's something that we don't really give enough credit to CJ for, is his ability as a floor general, playing the 1 and the 2, because he did a lot of that.
I think he played a lot of point guard for New Orleans.
Yeah, for New Orleans he did. He had some stints in Portland where he was a point where Lillard would leave halfway through the first quarter. CJ would assume the point guard duties, and he would do a great job. So he's very versatile, those 2 guard spots. Obviously, you got to cover for him on defense. That's not a strong suit of his. But if you just need buckets, you need shot creation, you need playmaking, he's a great guy to do that. He is 31, so I think he'll be about 35 when his contract ends. So the last year or two could get a little sketch. But in the short term, I mean, he's a great piece for the Pelicans, a great guy next to Zion when he comes back. A great fit on this roster. I love the leadership he brings. I think it was a huge reason why they made that run in the postseason that he did last season. And I mean, he's just all around a very solid player. Not going to be a top 20, top 15 guy, but I mean, his handles are underrated. I think he's one of the better ball handlers in the league, a great shooter, just a great guy overall. So hats off to CJ for this deal. I think it's a good signing by New Orleans. I wouldn't say it's awesome just because he's going to be in his mid-30s by the time it's in the latter years. But it's very solid. And I mean, you want to lock up talent while you can, because New Orleans, like Charlotte, like Minnesota, it's not a destination.
I was just about to say it. Yeah.
So exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, you got to do things like that. You got to spend a little bit more money than maybe you'd want to, but I think it's going to pay off for him, especially if Zion is healthy, which I'm sure we'll get to him in a minute. But
yeah,
generally a high on the signing for them.
You hit on the point where New Orleans already has the guy that they believe is they believe he's going to be a top 10, top 5 player. That's Zion. That's what they believe he's going to be. We'll see if it pans out. He's played 80 something games. We'll see if it works out. They have the second tier star and Brandon Ingram, who was Kevin Durant-esque against the Suns. The Suns had no answers. And think about that. Mikal Bridges, Jay Crowder, who is leaving, but Mikal Bridges, Jay Crowder, they had no answers defensively for Brandon Ingram. Mm-hmm. Now, the only thing they had left was the third tier star. If you're going into the extension thinking that CJ is supposed to be what he was in Portland, supposed to be the guy that's lifting up your franchise, or the tier 2 star, you're looking at it wrong. They had to lock up the talent while it was there, because if not CJ McCollum, if you let him go, who are you getting that's at that level? Mm-hmm. Exactly. You're not getting anyone that's what CJ, maybe a top 35, 40 guy, maybe somewhere around there now. I mean, he can score with the best of them, but what I like about it is he's very malleable. He can fit around all these different lineups. Like you said, I couldn't believe the number. Played 41% of his minutes at point guard for the Pelicans. Wow. That's your replacement for losing Alonzo Ball, guy that you thought was going to be able to get the ball to Zion on easy lobs, which he did. That's your guy that's going to be replacing Devontae Graham if he goes somewhere, if they get rid of him, right? So that's something that CJ is a way better souped up version of that. And what I like about CJ, why I disagree with everyone that's saying it's too much for someone that's going to be old, getting older. Would you say 35?
Yeah.
Yeah. The reason I like it regardless is because he's a smart player. He's not, I don't mean to pick on the guy, but he's not going to be Russell Westbrook, where he is taking a lot of bad shots, where he is not fitting around the talent and not accepting roles. I think if Willie Green told CJ McCollum to go spot up in the corner, yeah, he wouldn't love it, but he would do it. He would do it. I think he is a business guy, and that is in broadcasting and on the NBA court. So I think it's perfect. Now, the issue is Pelican fans thinking that, or anyone thinking that they are going to be, a top seed because of this core. It's going to take some time. The biggest chip is Zion, as we've been talking about here. Mm-hmm. So I like the extension on the surface. We'll see. And if they flame out in the first round, or if they don't make the playoffs, it doesn't mean that they shouldn't extend CJ. You still have to get the talent and let the chips fall where they may.
Exactly. No, that's pretty much what I thought about the extension and the whole future of the Pelicans. A lot of it, they're placing hope in Zion because without him, they don't really have a chance to become a serious contender in the West. But if he does pan out, if he can stay at least relatively healthy and give them some great quality minutes at the four, I mean, we forget that. I mean, Zion, the second season, he transitioned to more of a playmaker on the ball.
Oh yeah,
Which it's insane to think about that a guy at his size, can run pick and rolls and be a distributor and maybe have CJ play off the ball. Which that's another thing. CJ can be an off ball guy. He's
done it for years.
Exactly. Next to Dame, he's used to doing that. So he can play off of Brandon. He can play off of Zion. So I mean, the fit is seamless. It's a very solid fit. The money is high, but I mean, so is the price you're paying for having a formidable team, especially in the West. Yeah. So, I mean, all around this team, I think there's a lot to look forward to. Troy Murphy, Alvarado, I mean, even Jackson Hayes to an extent.
Not on Herb,
man. I mean, dude, he's one of my favorite players already. I just love guys like that take pride in defense the way he does. Same with Alvarado. So they have those gritty players that are willing to do the dirty work, shooters. Zion, one of the best interior finishers in the entire league. Shot creators and CJ and Brandon. Across the board, I mean, this team is set up to be very successful. So, I mean, if I had to guess, I would say they finished somewhere around where they did last year. It's tough to put them in the mid-tier of the West because, I mean, you look at who we have, Denver, Golden State. I mean, the Clippers, just all the way down, the Mavs. It's brutal. But I think them,
they're
right in there.
I think the most fascinating question, maybe this is just for me, because like a lot of people are higher on the team I'm about to say. A lot of people are really high on this team. I think a good question is who will finish with a better record. Let's assume that you had to assume Zion plays 60 games. I mean, just for the sake of this, you have to assume he plays 60 games because he's healthy right now.
Mm-hmm.
Minnesota or New Orleans? I think that's tough.
Ooh, that is tough.
And people but see, you think it's tough, and I think it's tough. But people in Minnesota would just shut you down and say you're stupid, and like because they just brought in the best defensive player of the last 20 years, right? So I mean, the Wolves have more talent probably. They have better coaching, I think. Chris Finch. They have Karl Towns, who's he's not better than Zion, but I just feel like it's a really close call between Minnesota and New Orleans on who will have more wins this year. And people have the Wolves at 50 wins, and I don't. I would go under. I would go a bit under that. And that's also where I would have New Orleans, is just right under that. So
that's fair. So, question: what is it about the Wolves that makes you hesitant to put them a little bit higher, like 50 wins?
D'Angelo Russell. I'm not saying like he's going to be an integral part of everything. He's not the end all be all, but I think it's a little bit tough to have a dominant defense, no matter who is back there, whenever you're just getting blown by like that. We just saw it in Utah. Utah was finished 10th defensively, with Gobert having an incredible defensive year, but all of his guards were turnstiles. So can Ant-Man be a really, really, really good defensive player in year 3 or 4? Is this three?
I think 3,
yeah. Can D'Angelo Russell not be turnstile in year like 8 or 9, whatever it is for him? Like I feel like I need to see it first. And I just saw New Orleans, without Zion playing a single basketball game, compete with the number 1 seed. Devin Booker was hurt, but like I think New Orleans has that grit, that it factor that I need to see from Minnesota first. So.
They do. I mean, that's a good way to look at it. I mean, D'Angelo Russell, I mean, if you're really this down on D'Angelo Russell, you need to go watch one of the podcasts that we did a few months ago on the Timberwolves. And the headline was, is D'Angelo out in Minnesota? Does he need to be traded? And these people were having my head, man. They were not having it when I put that out there. So, hey, it got us the views. It got us the most amount of views of any video on our YouTube channel. So I appreciate the haters. But for some reason, people are just super protective of D'Angelo. They don't want to hear that he's not the guy for them. So at least I'm not the only one. I mean, you're pretty low on him as well, so I'm just gonna put that out there.
Yeah, and I think it's important to say we don't hate the guy. Like the guy is a great pick and roll passer.
Yeah.
I saw some of the shots he was taking in that series against Memphis, and I didn't like it. And then I also saw him getting blown by all the time. He just has his flaws, which a lot of players do. The main reason for the whole comparison between Minnesota and New Orleans is the Zion Karl Towns factor. Like I'm kind of just I really love what I see from Zion when he's healthy. Towns is still super talented, best offensive big man probably ever, but like I don't know. I just love New Orleans fit. They have more defenders, more guard, like more athletic guard defenders and wing defenders. I feel like Minnesota is going to be putting a lot on Rudy Gobert. So we'll see.
Well, once again. So he leaves Utah where like he was the end all be all from a defensive standpoint. And then you go to Minnesota and it's more the same. I mean, Cat is not going to be a great stopper. D'Angelo, we just got done talking about. Edwards has the potential, I think, but he's not quite there yet. So from all positions, I mean, it's just like, yeah, you're going to have to kind of have the same impact as you did in Utah if you want this team to really go anywhere, which is kind of unfortunate for him, but that's the way it goes. So, Shane, I think that takes us to the end of our conversation here, man. We can go all day about these things. Always a pleasure speaking with you about this, but as always, appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us on NTC. It's great to see what you're doing out there, and opportunities are coming your way, man. I'm sure of it. So hope you have a great experience here at this next year media days, and best of luck to you going forward.
Thanks, Aaron. Yeah, it'll be awesome out here in LA with Clippers Media Day tomorrow. So we'll see how that goes. Kawhi Leonard, first time speaking in a calendar year. Kind of wild to think about it. But I appreciate you having me on, and yeah, let's definitely do this around when we have 20 or so games into the season where we kind of get our first takeaways.
Yep, sounds good to me, man. Let's plan on it. But until next, everybody, hope you enjoy the rest of your evening here. Hope you're getting hyped for media day, training camp, beginning of the season. We'll be back here with weekly episodes. And then when we start the regular season, 2 episodes a week. So we're ramping up the content here at NTC. So be sure to keep it locked. Until next time, everybody, have a good one. And we'll see you in the next installment of NTC.